And when you think about the landscape of lending specifically in sort of the digital asset realm, how would you describe that landscape and where Maple Finance fits in? In my sort of simple sort of like way of looking at the world, there's sort of like the centralized finance sort of lenders, right? And then there's sort of the DeFi lending protocols, right? And everything can be sort of put on a spectrum between sort of those two bookends. How do you see it? Do you view it differently? Would you take a more nuanced approach? Just curious.
No, I think that's actually the best and the simplest way to kind of view the ecosystem as it stands today. I think historically, the CeFi or centralized lenders were probably 95% of the market, and 5% was DeFi. And historically, those centralized lenders included BlockFi, Celsius, Genesis, Babel, a number of players who are not around today. The DeFi players include Aave, Morpho, Spark, and Compound. And I would say now the market has kind of flipped where probably more of it is happening in DeFi. And these two camps are a spectrum, as you said. And so you have fully DeFi, like let's say Aave, where everything is run algorithmically. There's no centralized underwriting decisions made, and anyone can use the platform provided they have crypto that they can put in. And then you have fully centralized, which would include somebody like a Ledin, a 2Prime, a Galaxy, or a Tether. And there, it's a single team making the decisions, and they don't really use smart contracts for anything. They take in Bitcoin as their most preferred type of collateral, and then they either wire funds through the banking system or they send stable coins out to borrowers. If you look at us, we're kind of in between. And it's a strategic decision by us because we felt like it was the best way to differentiate ourselves from the other DeFi players. And versus the CeFi players, we're able to then access more kinds of funding, or DeFi funding specifically, and have transparency that they just can't match with their CeFi centralized business model. So if you look at the kind of the defining features of how we work, we send all of the loans out using smart contracts that we developed. So instantly the loans are very transparent. You can see the performance in real time, and we're not reliant on banking operations to serve our borrower set. On the other side of that, we are actually integrated with all of the major custodians. So we can take in native BTC, which is something that Aave and Morpho and Spark and the other DeFi lending platforms can't do. So we can actually take collateral from any blockchain and then send a stablecoin loan against it. That is actually viewed as a feature by our borrowers because they prefer to keep their assets in regulated custodians rather than just giving them to us to control. And also they don't really want to put them in smart contracts. They're collateral, this is. So we actually have an advantage then when dealing with our institutional customer set. And so it's come from finding that niche. Meanwhile, our other centralized lenders, while they have the ability to work with custodians, they do not have the ability to access funding from DeFi. And so if you look, we've had some of the bigger partnerships we've had this year have been Pendle, Morpho, Spark. These have all been sources of capital that has come into the Maple platform, contributed to our AUM growth to north of $1 billion. But we're the only institutional lender who can make use of that. And I think that's a really important differentiator. And that's enticing larger borrowers to come to us because they know that we have this reliable source of funding.
Excellent answer. And, I'd like to ask other operators this question because I think it's a good one for, folks to have a real strong sense of. When you look at Maple today and operating the business as a CEO, what metrics do you look at to really, sort of gauge the health of the business and sort of overall momentum? Is it AUM, which would be sort of like the, maybe the more simplistic answer from, again, a lending standpoint? But I always find that operators have a more nuanced answer around this. It's, never just one thing. So I'm curious how you would answer that question.
It's a very good question. And the types of metrics that you would look at are, in my view, they're particular to lending. And so historically, the way that every lending company goes bust is they don't run out of money. They incur too many credit losses. And a common way that they mask that is through AUM growth or the size of their loan book. So what I want to do is kind of give a balanced answer and say, you're actually correct that the simplest answer is AUM is probably the most important thing. However, you want to caveat that or qualify it by looking at things like loan loss performance and credit losses. Because as I said, it's the credit losses that will sink a lending business. And so I'd say, let's say it's like 50% AUM. Then you would look at revenue, and then you would look at credit losses or defaults or delinquent loans. And then the other thing that I would look at is health and diversity of the book. So how many different borrowers do we have? it's not a good position to be in as a lending company to have like one major borrower who, if they either defaulted or repaid their loans, would have a material impact on your business. And similarly, on the other side of that, you don't want to be beholden to a small number of lenders where if they withdraw their funding, your lending business is toast. So in that order, again, it's AUM, it's revenue, loss performance, and then like diversity of the loan book. So let's say borrower and lender concentration. I look at all of those, and more recently we've been trying to really diversify the book so that we have more and more customers, and we think that will make us more competitive in the market if we're able to do that.